If you walk through the streets of any major city today, you will not see bread lines stretching around the block. You will not see men wearing sandwich boards begging for work. You will not see the Dust Bowl swallowing farms or shanty towns built of scrap metal in Central Park. On the surface, everything looks fine. The stock market is near all-time highs. Unemployment numbers are historically low. Everyone in their pocket holds a supercomputer more powerful than the technology that sent Apollo to the moon. We are told, incessantly, by economists, politicians, and media pundits that we are living in an era of unparalleled prosperity. Yet, you feel it, don't you? A low-level hum of anxiety that never quite goes away. The feeling that you are running faster and faster just to stay in the same place. The gnawing realization that despite working harder than your parents did, you own significantly less than they did at your age. We look back at the black and white photos of the 1930s, the Great Depression, as a distant nightmare, a period of abject poverty that we have technologically and economically evolved past. We pity them. But what if I told you that the history books are lying to you, not by what they say, but by what they omit? What if I told you that if you strip away the cheap plastic consumer goods, the streaming services, and the easy debt, and you look only at the fundamental requirements of human survival, shelter, food, energy, and the ability to raise a family, the average citizen today is, by many metrics, economically weaker than the average citizen during the Great Depression? We are living through a silent depression. It is silent because it is not marked by a sudden crash, but by a slow, decades-long suffocation of the middle class. It is hidden behind manipulated data and a curtain of cheap technology. Today, we are going to pull back that curtain. We are going to do the math that the central bankers pray you never do. We are going to travel back to 1930, then to 1971, and finally to today, to understand how the greatest wealth transfer in human history was disguised as prosperity. To understand the silent depression of today, we must first confront the visible depression of the past. The 1930s were devastating. Unemployment hit 25%. GDP collapsed by nearly half. People literally starved. It was a crisis of income. There was simply no money circulating. However, if you were lucky enough to have a job, even a low-paying one, the purchasing power of your money was astronomically higher than it is today. Let us look at the data. In 1930, the average annual income for an American worker was roughly $1,368. Now, let's look at the cost of the American dream in 1930. The average new house cost roughly $3,900. Do the math. The price of a home was approximately 2.8 times the average annual salary. A single breadwinner, working an average job, could buy a house with less than 3 years of gross income. What about a car? A brand new 1930 Ford Model A cost roughly $600. That is less than half of a year's salary. Rent? The average monthly rent in a city was around $18 to $25 a month. A week's wages covered a month of housing. Let that sink in. In the depths of the worst economic crisis in modern history, the fundamentals of life were attainable without drowning in a lifetime of debt. If you had labor to sell, that labor could purchase dignity. Now, let us look at today. The media tells us the average salary is around $59,000. They tell us we are rich, but what does that $59,000 buy? Today, the median home price in the United States is over $400,000. In many major cities, it is double or triple that. The math has changed catastrophically. In 1930, the home-to-income ratio was 2.8. Today, it is nearly 7 to 8 times the average income nationally, and in desirable areas, it is 10 to 12 times. The average new car is $48,000, almost an entire year's salary for many. Rent consumes 40% to 50% of the average worker's take-home pay. In the 1930s, the crisis was that you couldn't find a job. Today, the crisis is that you have a job, perhaps 2 jobs, perhaps a spouse who also works full-time, and you still cannot afford the standard of living that a single factory worker could afford during the Great Depression. In 1930, they had a deflationary depression. Prices fell. Today, we have an inflationary depression. Prices rise, suffocating us slowly. The question you should be asking is, how did they hide this? How can the official government data claim inflation is low when the price of survival has risen 10 times faster than wages? To understand the silent depression, you must understand the greatest magic trick in economic history, the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. The CPI is the government's official yardstick for inflation. It's supposed to measure the cost of living. When the news tells you inflation is down to 3%, they are quoting the CPI. But what if the yardstick is made of rubber? What if the government stretches it whenever it suits them? Up until the 1980s, the CPI was reasonably honest. It measured a fixed basket of goods that people actually needed to survive. But in the 1980s and 90s, the government realized that honest inflation numbers were politically devastating. So they decided to change the methodology. They broke the yardstick. They introduced two key concepts designed to suppress the official inflation number: substitution and hedonics. First, substitution. The government argues that if the price of steak goes up, you won't buy steak anymore, you'll buy hamburger. If the price of hamburger goes up, you'll buy chicken. If chicken goes up, you'll eat dog food. The CPI no longer measures the cost of maintaining a constant standard of living. It measures a declining standard of living. It assumes that as you get poorer, you will happily downgrade your life, and therefore inflation hasn't actually hit you. Second, and more insidious, is hedonics, or quality adjustments. The government argues that because a new car has airbags, air conditioning, and a backup camera, it is better than a 1970s car. Therefore, even though the price has gone from $3,000 to $48,000, they argue that a huge portion of that price increase isn't inflation, it's quality improvement. They mathematically reduce the price in the CPI calculation. They do this with everything: computers, TVs, phones. They tell you that because your TV is bigger and flatter than a 1990s TV, its hedonic price has crashed. This is how they hide the silent depression. They heavily weight the CPI with things that are becoming cheaper due to manufacturing, outsourcing cheap electronics, fast fashion, plastic toys, while suppressing the weight of the things that are skyrocketing: housing, healthcare, education, and quality food. You cannot live inside a flat-screen TV. You cannot eat an iPhone. The things you need to survive have hyperinflated, but the official data says you are fine. If we use the same methodology to calculate inflation today that we used in 1980, before they corrupted the data, current inflation wouldn't be 3%. It would be closer to 10% or 12% a year. And we have been running at that real rate for decades. That is the sound of your wealth evaporating. If you want to pinpoint the exact moment the silent depression began, the moment the American middle class started its long, slow death, you have to look at one specific date: August 15th, 1971. Before this date, the post-war prosperity of America was built on a foundation of sound money. Under the Bretton Woods Agreement, the US dollar was pegged to gold, $35 an ounce. This meant the government had a physical restraint on how much money it could print. But by the late 1960s, America was overspending. The Vietnam War and Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs were draining the treasury. We were printing more paper dollars than we had gold to back them up. Facing national bankruptcy, President Richard Nixon made a fateful decision. On that Sunday evening in 1971, he went on national television and temporarily suspended the convertibility of the dollar to gold. That temporary measure never ended. In that moment, the anchor was cut. The dollar changed from being a claim on a real asset to being a fiat currency backed by nothing but faith and government decree. Why is this the start of the silent depression? Because it fundamentally broke the relationship between labor and value. Before 1971, if you worked hard and saved money, your savings held their value. After 1971, the government gained the power to debase your savings at will by printing infinite amounts of money. If you look at almost any economic chart, wages versus productivity, the cost of housing versus income, national debt, you will see a massive, undeniable divergence starting exactly in 1971. Before 1971, as the country got more productive, workers' wages rose alongside productivity. We shared in the growth. After 1971, productivity kept soaring due to technology, but real wages flattened. For 50 years, the average worker has produced more and more, but has been paid virtually the same amount in real purchasing power. Where did all that extra wealth go? It went to the people who own the assets. It went to the financial sector. It went to the top 1%. When money is disconnected from reality, those closest to the money printer win, and those who work for wages lose. 1971 was the year they changed the rules of the game, so the house always wins. Once the dollar was untethered from gold, the nature of the American economy shifted radically. We moved from a production economy making steel, cars, and appliances to a financialized economy making debt, derivatives, and complex financial instruments. In the 1950s, the financial sector accounted for a small fraction of corporate profits. Its job was to serve the real economy, to lend money to businesses, to build factories. Today, finance is the economy. It accounts for a massive share of all corporate profits, yet it produces nothing real. It merely extracts wealth from the productive sectors. This era ushered in what economists call the Cantillon effect. The Cantillon effect describes what happens when a central bank prints new money. The money doesn't magically appear in everyone's bank account at once. It enters the system at the top. The Federal Reserve gives the new money to the big banks and financial institutions at near zero interest rates. These institutions, the Cantillon insiders, get to spend this new money first, before prices have risen. They use it to buy up real estate, stocks, and companies. By the time that money circulates down to the average person through wages, prices for houses and stocks have already been bid up by the insiders. You get the inflation, they get the asset appreciation. This is not a bug in the system, it is a feature. The financialization of the economy is a wealth transfer mechanism designed to siphon the productivity of the working class into the pockets of the asset-holding class. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, bankers were jumping out of windows because they had lost real money. In the Silent Depression, when bankers gamble and lose, they get bailed out by the taxpayer and pay themselves record bonuses. The connection between hard work and success has been severed. You cannot outwork inflation. You cannot save your way to prosperity when your savings are being debased by 10% a year. The only way to win is to own assets. But the game is rigged to make those assets unaffordable to the newcomer. If wages have been stagnant since 1971, but the cost of living has skyrocketed, how have Americans kept spending? How have we maintained the illusion of a middle-class lifestyle? The answer is the defining characteristic of the Silent Depression: debt. We have substituted debt for income. In the 1930s, debt was shameful. People avoided it at all costs. Today, it is a prerequisite for existence. To get a basic job that pays a living wage, you are told you need a college degree. So, we burden 18-year-olds with non-dischargeable student loan debt before they have earned their first dollar. They start life with a negative net worth. To get to that job, you need a car. But cars are unaffordable, so we normalize 7-year auto loans, trapping people in perpetual payments for a depreciating asset. To put a roof over your head, you must take on a mortgage that is 8 times your annual salary, effectively becoming an indentured servant to the bank for 30 years. This is modern serfdom. In feudal times, a serf worked the lord's land and got to keep a fraction of the harvest to survive, giving the rest to the lord. Today, you work, and before you even see your money, the government takes its cut in taxes. Then the bank takes its cut for your mortgage, your car, and your student loans. What you are left with your disposable income is often less than what a medieval serf kept. The difference is that the medieval serf knew he was a serf. The modern American believes he is free because he can choose between 500 channels on streaming television while he drowns in debt. This debt burden is why birth rates are collapsing. Young people look at the math and realize they cannot afford to reproduce. They are not choosing a child-free lifestyle out of empowerment. They are responding to economic duress. A society that cannot afford to replace itself is a society in the depths of a depression. This brings us to the ultimate defense of the modern economy. The skeptics will say, how can we be in a depression? Look at our technology. We have iPhones, the internet, artificial intelligence. People in the 1930s didn't even have refrigerators. This is true, and it is the core of the grand illusion. We are living in a strange paradox. We are tech-rich, but asset-poor. Technology is deflationary. It gets better and cheaper over time. A 60-inch 4K TV is miraculously cheap today. You can have endless entertainment streaming into your eyeballs for $15 a month. You can buy cheap, disposable clothing made in sweatshops overseas, delivered to your door in 2 days. These things provide a dopamine hit. They mask the poverty. They make life feel modern and prosperous. But these are consumables. They are not wealth. Wealth is assets that appreciate in value and provide stability. The things that have become cheap are the things that distract you. The things that have become unaffordable are the things that liberate you. Housing, land, quality education, independent healthcare, ownership of productive businesses, these are the foundations of real freedom, and they are slipping further and further out of reach for the average person. We have traded ownership for access. We have traded stability for convenience. We have traded the American dream for an Amazon Prime subscription. The person in 1930 starving in a Hooverville knew they were poor. The person today living in their parents' basement at age 30, scrolling TikTok on a $1,100 iPhone, thinks they are just temporarily embarrassed. They do not realize they are the new face of poverty. The silent depression is real. The data proves it. Your lived experience confirms it. We are poorer than our grandparents in the ways that truly matter. We have less stability, less ownership, and less hope for the future. We have been frogs slowly boiled in a pot of currency debasement and financialization, but the first step to solving a problem is admitting it exists. We must stop accepting the manipulated government data that tells us everything is fine. We must stop measuring our self-worth by the consumer junk we accumulate. The era of easy living on borrowed money is coming to an end. The mathematical reality of debt is catching up to the system. What comes next will be turbulent. As the illusion breaks down, there will be anger, there will be chaos. But for those who see the truth, there is opportunity. The opportunity to reject the debt slavery, to prioritize real assets over digital distractions, to learn skills that have tangible value in the physical world. The Depression has been silent for 50 years, but the wake-up call is going to be very, very loud. Are you listening?